Penn State is talented and has depth, but is that enough to finally get over the hump and beat Michigan or Ohio State?
You are Locked On Big Ten, your daily podcast on the Big Ten Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey there, welcome into Locked On Big Ten. I'm your host, Nate Dickinson. Coming up on today's show, we're going to talk to Zach Sako of Locked On Nittany Lions and give him the first of our spring recaps for the next couple of weeks. Going to be talking to a whole bunch of hosts from around the Locked On Big Ten network about how their teams are looking now that the spring is finishing up. We'll talk to Zach about Drew Aller replacing the strong cornerbacks that leave the Nittany Lions and everything else that we need to know about what is up at Penn State as that team looks to become a team that isn't just a 10-win team, but one that can really compete in the college football playoff yet again. That's coming up here in just a moment. This is Locked On Big Ten, where you can get everything you need to know about the conference every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube at Locked On Big Ten. That's 10 at the end when you're typing it out, not T-E-N. I'm Nate Dickinson at Nate with Sports, and thank you for being one of the everydayers, if you are, who listen to us every single day of the week. Let's get right into things with Zach Sako. He's the host of Locked On Nittany Lions and, of course, an expert on everything going on with this team. He's been around them a lot this spring, and we ask him everything that we need to know about what's going on with Penn State as they try to become a real contender here this fall. Hey there, you're listening into Locked On Big Ten. We're joined by the host of Locked On Nittany Lions, Zach Sako. I'm Nate Dickinson, here to give you a little bit of a spring recap as we go around the Big Ten and figure out where everyone stands as we get into the off season of the football season. Zach, thanks as always for joining us here on the program. It's a pleasure to have you on. As we get into things here with Penn State, I could beat around the bush if I wanted to, but let's just talk about what everyone wants to talk about. Drew Aller, 5-star quarterback, potentially the guy to bring Penn State to the promised land of finally getting over Michigan or Ohio State. But let's not get too ahead of ourselves. How are people liking him in spring?
So Drew had, I think, his moments in the blue-white game specifically. Very streaky. Neither offensive group could get it together, right? Whether that was the blue team with Drew Aller, the first-string players, and then the scout team offense with Bo Prabula. I think the story is going to be behind just how complete this team is. So Drew Aller doesn't have to set the world on fire by any means. He's going to be good. I think eventually he is going to be a lot better than Sean Clifford, right? That's the whole conversation about Drew, is that he has the potential. He's supposed to be what Christian Hackenberg was, or Anthony Morelli, the tall 5-star quarterbacks of the past. But Drew Aller is in a system where both coordinators are back, so that benefits him, of course, offensively, but then the defense is going to set him up mutually with short fields. He's got a ground game, possibly one of the, if not the best, running back tandem in the Big Ten and all of the country. Honestly, I know Michigan's up there, but I think Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen are just as good. I will say that. And then the offensive line to go along with it. So what I liked about Drew in the blue-white game is that he showed progress. He showed veteran mindset. He wasn't quick to roll out of the pocket. He trusted his offensive line. He went through his progressions. I think that's very important. So this is someone that is in his second year of college football, and he already looks like he's midway through his third or fourth year. So Drew Aller's going to take time, right? He's going to need to settle in, and I think games like West Virginia help accelerate that clock. Road game against Illinois is probably going to be the biggest challenge since that's game 3. But I like Drew Aller a lot. So does everybody else in the Penn State fan base. But know that he has assets around him to not necessarily bail him out, but to continue to build him up. So there's not a lot of pressure on him.
Any other names that are impressing or sticking out to people here as we get through the spring?
Yeah, the wide receivers, I think, are kind of the biggest question mark because, okay, thank goodness that Drew has the running backs, the offensive line. I'd even go a step further and say the tight ends as well, given that there's some question marks about injuries or off the field issues, right? With Theo Johnson, that report came out about having charges brought against him off the field. But and I don't know how that's going to affect his play yet. But the wide receivers, they got Dante Cephas on campus. Amari Evans had stepped up over the course of the spring. I mean, James Franklin wasn't ready to name him with that group. He kept saying Trey Wallace, Keandre Lambert-Smith, KLS, Trey Wallace. That's how the conversation went with coach. But if you asked other players, specifically, I asked Trey Wallace at a post-practice press conference and said, who stepped up in your mind in among your fellow wide receiver teammates? And he's like, Amari Evans. He didn't even hesitate. He didn't blink. And he went on to say just what he does well and what he's been doing well at. So Amari Evans being at least somebody who probably isn't going to start because now Dante Cephas, an all MAC conference player, is on campus, and I think should be able to build that rapport with the team, learn the playbook, and the same thing, that chemistry with Drew Aller. But to have Amari Evans coming up the way he is in the case that Cephas, is unavailable for whatever reason, right? I don't want to speak an injury into existence or anything, but you always have to plan for the worst and hope for the best. And Amari Evans, whether he's a starter or being a backup, is a good asset to have in the wide receiver core right now, just with the limited options that Penn State unfortunately has.
As you look forward into the fall, let's get a little bit more abstract here. Expectations for this Penn State team are obviously high, but it's at the same time at a place where Nittany Lions, let's say last year, were in that kind of spot where you had Michigan, Ohio State, then Penn State, and then everybody else here. As a team that was in that middle ground before, how are the expectations being handled as we look forward to a season for this team where they're hoping to get over that edge?
Well, now the consensus seems to be that Penn State is going to go around 10-2 and that the hump is Michigan, Ohio State. And the fan base still believes that Penn State's not going to get it. Select fans, right? But if you ask a majority, if you were to poll every single Penn State Nittany Lion fan, and honestly every college football fan, they would say that Penn State will win 10 games. They should win all the games that they should, and then lose to Ohio State and lose to Michigan. That's just the story of it. That's the nature of it. So the expectations generally are that Penn State's going to go 10-2. I'm in the boat of that they go 11-1. I think Ohio State's taken a step back. Michigan, that's so late in the season. Right now on paper, Michigan still wins that game, but it can go either way for both teams. Injuries can happen. The way the season breaks for both teams could. And Michigan now making the college football playoff in back-to-back seasons definitely has a target on its back. So I wonder how the Wolverines are going to handle that. But I think Ohio State is vulnerable in this case. As talented as they are, I don't know that I trust their defense. And from what I'm reading is that the quarterback station seems a little murky there. And so now you don't have that leverage of CJ Stroud or Justin Fields anymore to bail you out. Ohio State's going to have to look towards the defense saving the day. And from what we saw last season, the defense couldn't do that. So if Penn State is going to strike, this is the year to do it. So 12-0 is definitely the ceiling, a college football playoff berth. I would say a realistic basement for them is 9-3. They lose to Michigan, they lose to Ohio State because that's a road game, right? I'd like Ohio State much more in Beaver Stadium this season and just kind of say, all right, Michigan on the road, we'll chalk that up to a guaranteed loss. I think Illinois is a game where they could get surprised, right? Because that's a Penn State team 2 years ago that didn't match up well. Brett Bielema hasn't changed anything. I do think Penn State still wins this Illinois game, but it's going to come with a lot of bumps and bruises. But we're saying worst case scenario, Bielema outcoaches Franklin. They lose that road game, and then they just have some close calls with some teams they definitely should, beat out of the water, right? They should be able to smoke them, and they don't. And worst case scenario, obviously, is they lose Maryland and everything else, but that's not even the realm of possibility.
We're going to continue the conversation with Zach here in just a minute on Locked On Big Ten. Before we get to that though, today's episode is brought to you by Bird Dogs. Bird Dogs are the most versatile shorts out there that combine extreme comfort with the ability to wear them anywhere. If you want to go to the beach, you can wear your Bird Dogs. If you're going out on a date, you can wear your Bird Dogs. If you're heading out to the course to play 18, you can wear your Bird Dogs there too. They're an athletic short. They're a formal short, a casual short. Any kind of shorts that you want them to be is what Bird Dogs are. They fit you well and they are versatile too. a kind of short that you can wear anywhere and can fit anyone too. If you head on over to birddogs.com, you're going to find out what I'm talking about. These things are so comfortable to wear. They've been sending them out here to our hosts at Locked On as we start to give you and tell you more about them, and they really are the real deal. You go and try Bird Dogs and you'll be able to see that these are not just gym shorts. These are not just athletic shorts. These are not just going out shorts. It's a combination of all of that combined into one so that you can really wear these things anywhere and bring that kind of comfort that Bird Dogs provides with you too. And you can do it all right now by using our promo code and getting a little more extra too at birddogs.com/lockedoncollege. When you go there and enter your promo code lockedoncollege when you check out, you'll be able to get a custom Bird Dogs Yeti style tumbler for free with every order. It's a shorts company, but the tumbler is actually pretty high quality too. The website is birddogs.com/lockedoncollege, and you use your promo code lockedoncollege to get your Bird Dogs tumbler as well. Let's continue on here now with Zach Seiko with Locked On Nittany Lions on Locked On Big Ten. Well, we'll see what happens. Of course, Penn State, sky high expectations to be able to get at least one of those big wins this season. Zach Seiko with us here from Locked On Nittany Lions on Locked On Big Ten. Zach, a cornerback position is something that if you're an outsider looking in, is one of the big question marks because you lose Joey Porter, you lose Jair Brown. But I know that position has depth at Penn State. Can you just go a little bit more into depth on exactly what you're getting there over on the outside?
Yeah, so I'm actually glad that you brought this up, Nate, because cornerback I still think is a strength, the secondary as well as a whole. Joey Porter Jr., as good, as talented as he was, dealt at the end of the season with the appendectomy, had to have his appendix removed. So there was that. But Kalen King, but not enough people are talking about him. He is a legitimate first rounder. He could be the first cornerback taken in next year's draft. So Penn State fans, they said, oh, well, Joey Porter Jr. will be the first round pick in Penn State history for corners. It happened, but it didn't happen, right, with the 32nd overall pick, but it was in the second round. But Kalen King will definitely put that to rest. He is better than Joey Porter Jr. I will go on the record and say that. And it's no disrespect to JPJ. It's just that Kalen King, when you avoided Joey Porter Jr. on that other side of the field, Kalen King not only stepped up, but held his own ground pretty consistently. You had nowhere to go when you were targeting the boundary. So teams went over the middle, and Penn State, of course, adjusted. Manny Diaz is a great defensive coordinator, but it's just the continued work of Terry Smith, Anthony Poindexter, just collectively in the secondary to go recruit these diamonds in the rough and turn them to these NFL-style cornerbacks that can be left on an island, shut down one side of the field, and then you don't have to babysit them. You can let the safeties do what they need to do. That's why Jair Brown was successful, because Joey Porter Jr. and Kalen King both did their jobs, and I think that's going to be the case again this year. You had Storm Duck transfer in thinking that he's going to get all this playing time. Joey Porter Jr. is gone. It's just Kalen King. He's the only surefire starter. Johnny Dixon had something to say about that. So I think that Kalen King and Johnny Dixon, and now they just get the transfer from Mississippi State. They have incredible, talented freshmen. Elliott Washington is in line for some playing time. He's one of the fastest players on the team, clocked a sub 4.3 40-yard dash according to Penn State's leaderboards. So he's fast. You still have Daquan Hardy, who's a veteran at the slot. I like the secondary a lot. I don't think there's a lot of question marks there.
Well, if there are question marks, where are they here, Zach? If there's going to be one, whether it be position or position group or anything like that, that defines the success or failure this season, where do you see it being?
Interior defensive line, I think, and wide receivers, because you have the running backs, the tight ends, the offensive line, all of that collectively. And I think Dante Cephas will provide that spark that they need. Penn State's completely fine on the offensive side of things, and Mike Yurcich knows what he's doing, right? Interior defensive line, this is something that, Penn State, it's particularly dependent on what the injury, I don't know, the availability. Let's just say that, because Keziah Izzard and Hakeem Beamon were in comfy clothes for the blue-white game, and James Franklin said all spring season, we need interior defensive line. We need interior defensive line. We need interior defensive line. And that told you something, right? And it's just like, oh, the players aren't doing what they need to. Well, why does he keep saying that? because two players might not be available for the start of the season. And that's concerning. If those two guys are there, that's great. But also in the fact they still need the depth. They did get Alonzo Ford from Old Dominion, all Sun Belt honorable mention. Coaches said that he played in a nose guard type of role. So he always took on double teams. So I'm excited for the potential of this player, but I unfortunately don't know what he can provide as a rotational defensive lineman fully. Just that he has good expectations, but I don't think that he's going to be. Again, he was at Old Dominion for a reason, right? And I hope he can take that next step forward with Big Ten competition. But Penn State is still smaller on that defensive interior, and that's not what led them to lose that Michigan game a season ago. They got out schemed, they got outplayed, they got outsmarted by Michigan. That's the fact of the matter. So size doesn't matter here. I'm worried about the depth, because what happens if another defensive lineman in the interior goes down? And then you add, literally insult to injury, right? So if Penn State can land another defensive tackle through the portal before all said and done, I am more content with this position group. But I would have to say that's one of the weakest links, in addition to the special teams. Your kicker's brand new. Your kickoff specialist is brand new. Your punter's brand new. Your punt returner's brand new. Your long snapper's brand new. And all of those guys, once upon a time, right? Jordan Stout was all conference. Chris Stout, your long snapper from a season ago, was the best long snapper in the country, got the award to prove it. Those things matter. Those things matter. You're going to have a new holder on place kicks. So I don't know. I think special teams, though, that third side of the football helped Penn State a lot in 2021, especially. They could have been a lot worse if they didn't have that group. 2022, it was solid. 2023, I don't know. This is something that I'm worried that it could, if it comes down to a field goal or something like that, or it's a very tight game, special teams might not bail out Penn State.
I'd argue in the Big Ten more than anywhere, special teams matter, and for Penn State, it's going to matter too. A lot of really good info, Zach. Thank you as always for giving it to us. If you want to get more of it, head on over to Locked On Nittany Lions. Zach's doing this every single day, keeping you filled in on what's going on at Penn State, and I'm sure we'll have him back in here on Locked On Big Ten soon to break down whatever happens next over in Pennsylvania. We'll talk to you again soon, Zach. Thanks again for coming on.
Yeah, you bet, Nate. Thanks for having me.
Thank you to Zach Seiko for joining us here on the program. I am Nate Dickinson. We're going to continue to get you more of those spring recaps with our Locked On Big Ten hosts over the next few weeks here as we continue on with the show. Before we finish up here today, a quick wraparound of all of the other Big Ten news that we'll touch on now and some of it get to more in depth on later. The first and one of the biggest news stories being that USC Athletic Director Mike Bohn has stepped down. A surprising move, according to the reports that at least I read on ESPN.com covering things. Mike Bohn was the athletic director at USC before, but of course now will step down. As he says, a good time for him to step down is now because of the transition being made to the Big Ten. With a new conference taking over, it makes sense for a new leader to take over too. USC is a school that has not had too many different athletic directors. He was the first in the school's long history to not have any official connection to USC athletically. So they'll get a new leader of the athletic department as they come in here to the Big Ten and make this transition. We'll keep an eye on exactly what's going on over there and what that'll mean for their entrance into the conference. In media news, NBC is hiring Joshua Perry to lead the Big Ten Studio Road Show, as it will be a studio road show that they get as they take over Big Ten coverage. They are also reportedly targeting J.J. Watt for that show as well. As for Perry, you probably have seen him if you've watched a lot of Big Ten Network. He also does Bally Sports stuff, so it's not an unfamiliar face to Big Ten fans. Also, the Big Ten led all conferences in the revenue report for the 2022 fiscal year, more than $800 million in revenue coming the Big Ten's way, the top of all the Power 5 conferences in college sports. In actual news on the field, former UNC guard Caleb Love, this is basketball guard, not football guard, he was a commit to Michigan after previously being a champion at North Carolina. He has now decommitted from Michigan and is looking all over the place to see where he will go next. He had committed to the Wolverines just a month ago out of the transfer portal. And finally, in some really just rumors, Greg McElroy says the Big Ten is open to exploring expansion again, and specifically said that they could be targeting the state of Florida. We told you about the ACC schools who are considering potentially leaving Florida State, Miami, or at least looking at what they can do with their media rights deal. It looks like, at least according to McElroy, and he said it in a way that was him not reporting anything with sources, but him saying it as if he knew something. He's saying the Big Ten could go down south to try and get their next expansion teams. By the reasons that you make expansion, it makes sense. You get yourself a bigger media market, you expand the conference, and of course, get yourself a couple of good football programs in there too in Florida State and Miami. That's going to do it here for Locked On Big Ten today. I'm your host, Nate Dickinson. Be sure to follow along wherever you get your podcasts for more between every episode. It's at Locked On Big Ten, 10, not TEN, on wherever you get your podcasts, YouTube, and on Twitter. I'm Nate Dickinson, at Nate with Sports. We'll talk to you next time here on Locked On.